Okay, this is going to be the first part of the Photoshop where I'm going to show you how to eliminate the trees from your overlay, and maybe we'll touch up the bunkers here in this first one. In the end, hopefully you've imported your image and your satellite, you've got all that set up. One thing I want to do here is we're going to take our original overlay image that we're using in the controller script area, and I'm going to open that in Photoshop. So if you just double click on it, it should open in Photoshop. If not, right click on it, show in Explorer, and then go to it and then choose to open it in Photoshop. Once I'm in Photoshop here, let's save this out as the PSD file. So this is going to be overlay B underscore PSD, and then save it as the PSD. And so now we've got this Bing overlay saved as a PSD file. If we come back into Photoshop, then it's going to propagate here, and then I'm going to swap that out for my terrain overlay. For whatever reason, I just don't want to mess up the original image, and this is just one way to handle it. And then I also know this is my Photoshop file, and it has the layers that I'm using. So we're in Photoshop, and we're going to start by eliminating trees here. So we're going to go over to the hole that we're working on, and you've got your background layer, and we want to work non-destructively, and that really means that we can go back and edit things continually and we've never messed anything up. And I think that's the key to working in Photoshop, so that you can learn from your mistakes but not be kind of screwed by your mistakes in some way and can't go back and fix things. So I'm going to start by adding a new layer, and that's down here on the bottom right, and it should say create new layer. It's not, but in the end it's this far right with the little folded over corner. Double click on it and rename it stamp. And so this is going to be my non-destructive stamp layer. I'm using Photoshop most current 19.1. I pay $10 a month for Photoshop and Lightroom. I don't know if this is the same in GIMP, but there are similar tools, so I'm sure you could learn how to do it in GIMP as well. First thing I'm going to do is pick my clone stamp tool, and here's the key. I think this comes in typically as current layer. If you change it to current and below, so sample says current and below, it's going to choose this background layer from below, and then I can choose that area to paint, and then I can use that to paint over my trees. So I picked my stamp tool. I've got it on 100% opacity, so that means it's going to be it's going to completely take something over here. So let me just show you this real quick. It's going to take this T here. If I hold down Alt, it picks with the stamp tool, left click, and then it's picked here. So that means it's going to start from there, and see how it's taking that. It's taking from right here over the T. So in the end, we're going to Alt here near some rough that I like, and then start painting over our trees. Now, you'll see if you make a mistake, you can Control Z or just paint back over it. I'm not going to do everything with the stamp layer. You're going to see I'm going to create a rough layer that's green and a rough layer that's brown that we'll use to paint some areas that we struggle with. So anyway, the first job is to get as much of the trees out of here as we can simply by just stamp tool. And so one of the tricks that you're going to have to learn a shortcut is hold down Alt and right mouse button and go to the left or the right. If you go left, it shrinks your brush size. If you go to the right, it increases the size of your brush size. If you hold down Alt and you hit up or go up with your mouse and right mouse, sorry, Alt, right mouse button and go up, it changes the hardness. And that's just how strict your edge is. So in the end, I kind of, I don't want it to be exactly like a pencil. It's more like a brush here if you decrease the hardness. And then Alt to pick an area and then just start painting over. And you'll have to zoom in. But one of the cool things here is at some point you can just change this to current layer if you want it, and you don't want to keep getting stuff from below. But in the end, I've got it on current and below. But one of the things you can see is you can get a little messy, and you can see, oh, well, he just went in the fairway. What are we going to do here? But if you then take your eraser, because you're working in this stamp layer, you can then just erase that away. And if we were working on the background layer and messed up, we wouldn't be able to do that. And so this is going to allow you to work efficiently. And you can get these, it's going to take 2 hours, but you can get these trees all cleared out in a couple hours. Control plus here zooms you in, Alt right. And then let's go back here, go back to the stamp. And your brushes will be saved with the stamp tool or the eraser tool, or so you can see when I go back to the eraser, if I made the eraser really small and jump to here, back to the eraser, it saves your settings for those layers. So sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. But in the end, you get the idea here in terms of, I'm not going to do this all, but let's go over to that bunker here real quick so I can show you that trick. And then I'm going to show you how we also have to deal with some of the shadows on the light rough. Now you're going to need a smaller brush to kind of sneak in here. And you can be a little sloppy at the start. Remember, we can go over it. And then I'm just getting the rough edge here around the bunker. And we'll deal with the shadows secondarily here. And then you can come back here with that's probably not the best way to handle that. Some things you can do, these are just tricks. Remember, I'm just showing you concepts. I'm not showing you everything. You can outline your bunker just like you would a mesh with the lasso tool. And then I'm coming out here into the rough. And then what you'll see is now I can't accidentally mess up the bunker. So now pick my stamp back up. I'm going to zoom out with Control minus. I'm holding down Alt, left mouse to pick up some of that. And now you'll see. Now it's going to give you a hard edge. So you're going to, if you clear that off, you may not like that. And so you can then take your selection tool. You could soften that up a little bit if you want and just blur it a little. But in the end, I don't do that often. I just keep stamping and get it close. And now what you'll see is, now what we can do is let's do this bunker. And so the bunkers, you'll see, we got to take, there's multiple techniques we got to use on the bunkers, because one thing I don't like about how the overlay technique ends up working out here is that the bunkers often come in a bit bright. So see in here, that's going to come in way too, it's going to burn your retinas when you play your game. So I'll show you how we can deal with that. And so we're kind of, you can even take this bunker over here and stamp from it. And then you're going to start to see it's, now I'm off into the rough there. You know, you got to just kind of do these in baby steps, unfortunately. And then you can cheat too. Maybe I want to round that out. You know, we're recreating courses. It doesn't have to be accurate to the inch. Okay, let's save this here and show you what happened now when we go back into Unity. So now when we head back into Unity here, it's going to automatically update, and you're going to see here that that's clearing. And I just realized one thing I didn't do to set up my start, and I'm going to do it now. Hopefully it doesn't mess up too much. But if you look at your image size, it needs to be 8192 by 8192. That's going to give you the highest detail so that when you draw a dot, it's maybe 12 inches or so. Versus if you put a dot in, it means 3 feet in Unity. So 8190, did you see how I did that? Go here, image size, 8192 pixels by 8192. And so hopefully Larry and Justin, or wherever you're getting your satellites from, will give you something that's 8K resolution. And if not, just upscale it to this at the very start. So I should have done that at the beginning. It's not going to mess anything up. But it's going to give me finer detail so that when we're working, yep, you can see we're all good here. Let me just save that. But some of the line stuff that I'm doing with the fairways and creating some roughness or divots, need this 8192 texture. And then when you come back into Unity, you're also going to change this. So the first few times you get it set up, it'll take a while for this to update. But when you come in here, see this texture? You're going to your PSD file, remember. Go to your PSD and change this max size to 8192 and click apply. Compressed and true color don't have a huge difference. So I'm leaving that as compressed. The first time it does this conversion in Unity, it's slow. But I promise you, it's not doing this 8192 compression change anymore after this. Could be wrong on that. We'll see after this is done updating. I may put it to true color because one of these, it's a faster update. And in the end, you want to go with whatever is most efficient for you to be able to work here. So now you can see, well, you need to adjust your bunker splines. And I'm not going to get this perfect. But let's just recalculate the mesh here. But I'll show you also what I want to do to the bunkers to darken them up a bit. And then we also have to add our green and our brown that I was telling you about. Okay, let me just show you the green and the brown here. So as you're eliminating trees, some of this can start to get uniform or too brown in here, and that may not be what you want. And so what we're going to need to do is add a varied green layer that's somewhat close to our rough. So we create a new layer, and then what I'm going to do is use my color picker here and pick a dark green that I feel like represents my course. You know, like something in here, this nice dark green represents a nice healthy green grass. And then what you're going to want to do is switch the foreground and the background color. Let me make these obvious that they're different. So I've got my nice dark green, and then I need a light green. So switch the foreground and the background color. You can click these arrows here, or you can hit X as your shortcut. And you might as well memorize X, because the Alt and the right mouse and the X are my most commonly used tricks, and I'll show you that, or shortcuts, and I'll show you why in a minute. And now pick a lighter green. And what we're creating here is something very like a diffuse rough, you know, to paint with, basically. And I don't want to just put down a big green color and paint with green, because it will look like paint by numbers or something then. So we're going to fill this new layer we've created with a difference cloud. So just go render clouds. And so that gives me some variation in the green, but not enough. So go filter noise and add noise. And then you'll see if you change this slider, it makes it darker or lighter. And I want to leave this real low. So I'm going with a Gaussian amount of noise, monochromatic, and like in the 4 range, something low. And then I'm going to blur this. And I think hopefully you'll get what I'm doing here. And I really only need to blur it, you know, like 1 pixel, a half a pixel, 0.7 pixels. This is sort of like your rough. You know, you've got dark patches, light patches. And we can modify this. We can change the light and dark if we're not just right. And now I've covered my whole course in this, and now I'm going to teach you about masking and how we're going to paint using a mask. And so go up to layer here, and let's change this. See where it says layer mask? So go layer, layer mask, hide all. What that's going to do is make a black layer, and this is what's going to either hide or reveal what's in this color layer. And I know if you haven't worked with masks before, it'll be a little confusing at the start, but trust me, you'll get it and it's going to make your life easier. Double click on this layer and let's rename this green rough. And now what we can do is we can paint green. So say I want to give some fairway or some green rough back here. Pick the mask layer. So if you left click here, it's the green layer diffuse. If I left click here, now I'm on the mask layer. It's black and white only. It can be variations of that, so it's grayscale. And now let's pick our paintbrush. And I picked a spatter brush. Spatter brush is under general brushes. And if you scroll way down here, you're going to get to spatter brush. And just pick a spatter brush, and then you can change the size of it with this new alt right mouse trick you know now. Now watch, I'm going to go a little heavy-handed here, but I'm going to give myself some of this green rough back. And it looks like I'm going to need to blur it more. And I probably should have turned the opacity down on it. So let's undo that. Way too much. Do something so you're going to leave some of the original coloring. You know, we're not going to redo the whole course here. But you're going to paint with white, and it's going to be half opacity sort of. So I'm just going over top of some of that. And then we can come back with black or our eraser, but make sure the background color on the eraser is black, because the eraser colors to the background, if that makes any sense. Or you can use a paintbrush, but I don't like to switch now back to this other brush. You can paintbrush black on, so if you hit X, it switches foreground and background. See how I'm doing that? Now I'm painting black on, and if you're painting black, see I had the opacity, so now it's not doing it completely. But I'd rather use just the eraser, because then I can set my brush to the hardness all the way up this. But you don't want to paint to white. See that? What happens? Or when you erase to white, erase goes to the foreground color, erase goes to the background color, and the brush goes to the foreground color. Hopefully that makes sense. But I want it to be black here because I'm erasing, and now I can just come right up to my first cut. And then we can fix this shadow down here. We're going to zoom in and a little bit of touch up. And we can do that with the stamp tool. But now look, you got to go back to your stamp layer. I'm on the green rough layer. You're going to start stamping and think, why is it not doing what I want? You have to go back to your stamp layer and stamp over that. Now let's go back to the green rough layer, because I don't like this. If you see when we save this out, let's save it and see what it's looking like in Unity. We have to spread those colors out. They're too compact in terms of the coloring, and I think it's going to give us too much diffuse color variation here. And you'll see it does take a little bit of time to update. Now, if it takes as long as it did last time, we need to change this to true color. Yeah, because Unity's basically going through some algorithm to update this file, and it doesn't take this long, or it shouldn't take this long. Sorry. Guess I can pause it here real quick. Okay, so I'm going to change this to true color. and it's going to take a while for that to update, and I'm going to pause again. But after that, I'm thinking, yeah, our Photoshop updates will be quick. But you can see it's a monster file. Later on, we can compress it if we want to when we're done with everything we want. So now you can see we've, let's change our paint layer too, so that you can see what the changes look like underneath. So I'm just temporarily, I'm changing my terrain PSD back to this. Now you're going to want to keep both because the other one is going to allow you to plant trees. You see that? When I hide my mesh right now, I'm not going to see the trees here. But you're going to want to switch between these when it comes time to planting trees. You want your trees to come back, and so you're going to go back to your old image. See that? So now you've got, and that's, I guess, one good reason for renaming and saving. But see how I was saying I got too many little, I just don't think the grass is going to be that tight like that. And so let's go back to our Photoshop. And this layer, if I right click on this and I go disable layer mask, I can see this again. Let's make it larger spatters is what I want to do. So we're going to do an artistic filter, and I want to do sponge, I think is the bigger. I'm on the mask layer there. So make sure you're on your diffuse green layer there. And let's do artistic filter, and let's do like a sponge. And that's going to get me sort of larger pattern. You can change the brush size on that. And then it's got to apply that to the entire 8192 image. I'm going to show you one thing you want to do to trim a little bit to save you some memory in working with this file. And that's kind of that we don't need it to cover the entire course the way we're doing it. Let's trim this here. So I'm going to decrease the opacity so I can see through it. And then I'm going to pick this polygon lasso tool and just go around the outside of my course. And you're going to see I'm just going to delete. So now I've selected that. You're going to select inverse, and then I'm going to go on this green layer and delete it. So if you see, that's basically getting rid of all this information on the outside. So see how this is now transparent over here on my layer. And it just, it saves us from getting too bogged down here. Okay, and now I want to blur this. Let's see what that looks like now. Let's re-enable our mask. So right click there and go to enable our mask. And now you can see it's a little softer, I guess, is what I'm coming down to. That might have been too much. Maybe I don't want to blur it. Let's see what happens there. Yeah, you want to blur it a little bit. But let's go back to 2. You know, this is where some of the fiddling comes in. That might work. And then let's save it. You only have to do this once. Once you get this all set up, I'd have to show you how I'm working in my other file. It just, once you get it all set up, it's not bad. I promise you, you can do it in a day or two to get your whole terrain versus weeks on these things. But let's go back into Unity. Okay, see, that's better now. And now let's put our mesh back over it and see what it looks like. I like that. So now we're going to create brown so that we can put some dead areas in. Same thing, you can just grab from other areas on the course that are dead. If you like this up here, you go to your stamp layer and just grab some of this dead grass here. Start stamping that in. But let's see, it's not working great. Oh, you know what? I painted green rough over it, so it's not showing, so I'm going to hide it for a moment. Actually, let me do the brown rough, because it'll just be easier to do it this way here. We're going to do the exact same thing, but we're going to do it with brown. And so, new layer, brown rough, and then we'll be done with this one. Same thing, so we're going to eyedropper tool, pick a dark brown that we like, and then switch the foreground and the background and try to find a light brown. And then we'll also do some overall hue and adjustments with this, but we'll do that in another, just to get our greens right. Because photos I think tend to have things saturated a little funny. So let's do the same thing we did before, which is create a cloud. So filter, render cloud. Then filter noise, add noise. And then let's do sponge, I think it was. And then we'll blur it, and then we'll use it to paint. On a different one, I'll show you how we do sort of do divots on the tee boxes and create some roughness. It's a little different than this because you need slightly finer detail than this. Okay, now we're going to blur it. And then we're going to turn this same thing as a mask, but let's delete the extraneous information. So I turn the opacity down on it. Select the inverse and delete that off. And then now we're going to turn the opacity back up. And then we're going to create a mask here. So we're on the brown rough layer, layer, mask, hide all. And then now we can paint with white just like we did the other. But let's just come in here and give it some variation. Same thing, I want that spatter brush. Now you have to be a little careful. Sometimes it will save your brush. See how it has the little stamp here? If I pick this, it's going to move me to the stamper. So it saves some of these as general brushes and some as stamper brushes. So if you accidentally pick this and then come here and try to paint with it, and you wonder why it's not working, it's because it changed the brush on you. So spatter brush, and then I'm going to turn it down a little bit. And in my course, I have brown under the green. So I'm going to hide the green for the moment and just show you what I'm doing here. But we can start to, see it put me to the clown there. I just mentioned it. But now we're going to paint in white. You got to make sure you don't accidentally paint on this. I think that's what I just did. You want to be on the black and white layer, so you got to make sure you're not here. You can screw things up a little bit and then have to recreate that brown rough underneath. But come here on the black, and now I'm just painting in white, and you're going to see, okay, see now I'm putting in some dead grass. Okay, and you can obviously be finer with that. But now if you look, my green's all over top of it. So I actually just have to paint in black and let some of that brown come through. So see that? I hit X to get to my black. I'm swapping my foreground and background. And I'm painting in black, and this is what I'm talking about, non-destructive. Okay, now I'm letting some of that brown come through. You know, if you want the brown all to come through, you can erase it all. But I'm going to hit Control Z there. But look, I'm also working in 50% opacity. That's usually a good spot to work. See? Now that's starting to look a little better. Now maybe if I want this to be green, I go back to white and give me a little bit more green here. Cool. And then I need to erase that off. And it looks like I overpainted some of the... Now you may elect to leave that. Let's leave it. But see, I overpainted the brown as well. Let's go back to see what we did. I have allergies. I'm not dying. That cough there, I know. So you can start to see, okay, now we're getting a little better. Starting to look a little more realistic there. And then when we put some mow lines over this, then it's going to look gorgeous. So in the end, let me just do a little camera view on this. You know, starting to look better. I think we need to darken up our rough, but in general, this is the way to paint. We do not have the color scheme that we want to be at here yet. There's another video that I'm going to show, and maybe I should even put that in front of this one. But that's how to adjust our colors to get the proper color scheme. So we're going to save and stop this one here.